Hey, Paul. Thank you so much for agreeing to be the first guest on our new behind the scenes series for the Diff. And this is our pilot episode, so you're our first ever guest. I'm super excited to have you kick this off for us. Could you please quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here, Joel. My name is Paul O'Shaughnessy. I'm an engineering manager here at Facebook supporting our open source tooling team. I've been doing this team for about 5 years, and before that, doing other open source work here at Facebook. So I've really been in this open source space here for a long time.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the background. Can you talk a little bit, Paul, about your current role as it pertains to open source? I know you mentioned you're an engineering manager on the team, but can you kind of dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, so on my current team, we build a lot of the tools that teams like PyTorch, React Native, and many other teams here at Facebook use to kind of do open source well, or better than they would have otherwise. So some of that involves code syncing, taking commits from our internal repositories, and syncing those out to GitHub, enabling internal developers to retain workflows that they're really familiar with. We have many people who don't even know that they're contributing code to open source because we just automate a lot of that behind the scenes. So this enables us to keep communities up to date as we make changes, as well as kind of improve the velocity that folks can move. And so we do a lot with GitHub. We do a lot with other tools that exist out in the community. And so we really, really try to make it as easy as possible for folks at Facebook to do open source, but also make it as easy as possible for folks outside Facebook to contribute to Facebook open source projects.
Meta is a big company that takes open source like really seriously. And you kind of discussed a little bit previously here. We have hundreds of projects, thousands of engineers all contributing to the program. I imagine there's some challenges. Can you describe the challenges in supporting an open source program as large as Meta's?
Honestly, scale is the hardest part. So some of those are technical challenges. How do we scale our tools to support a growing number of projects and a growing number of people contributing to those projects? I mentioned some of the code syncing pieces. We do a lot with the GitHub API and using GitHub webhooks and responding to all of these events that are happening in our projects. So we have a bunch of technical challenges around keeping up with all of that activity. That's one of the big ones. I think one of the other ones is around developer behavior. We have thousands of engineers here at Facebook. There are many thousands of people contributing to our projects. So as we try to kind of introduce new tools or new changes to workflows, kind of bringing people along as we make those shifts can sometimes be a challenge. Looking a little bit broader, and there are a lot of challenges with projects themselves, and kind of figuring out how my team and others can support those projects in good ways. So security is a really big one. I mentioned GitHub vulnerabilities reported through GitHub. Security is a super, super vital part of the open source ecosystem. And so how do we deploy security fixes? How do we ensure that we're responding to all of those reports in healthy and fast ways? And so there's a lot of ways where we're also influencing developer behavior in that way.
This might be a little more of a kind of a philosophical question, but is there any hard lesson that you've learned over your time in open source? So like, for example, is there a decision or effort that you thought at the time was like, yeah, this has to be the way to go, but in hindsight, you would do it differently? You would do something else?
I know I've made a number of mistakes. And I think, in open source at Meta, we have kind of changed how we've approached some things in open source. So I have personal mistakes. We'll ignore those for the moment. But I think one of the things that comes to mind is actually around open source licensing. One of the decisions the company had made years ago was like, how do we do open source and balance, patents and things like that? And so, we had this whole BSD plus patents license situation, which was mostly fine for a while. And I think as the community grew and as the kind of influence of open source around the world continued to grow, there were a lot more people involved and a lot of changes around how people were thinking about open source. So a couple of years ago, we actually changed our licensing on almost all of our projects away from this BSD plus patents non-standard licensing to a really permissive MIT license. We removed that whole patents clause, and BSD and MIT are fairly similar, so it was not a dramatic change in terms of the actual licensing, but it gave a lot of people the confidence to trust our open source and not use it, not stop using it out of fear of legal ramifications. So I think that's one where we've learned a really good lesson, that we have to find the right balance of what's right for defending and kind of protecting the company versus what's right to just do for open source. I think there's another really important lesson that I've learned over my entire career in open source, and that's really around community. I think community is a really important factor that often gets discounted when you talk about open source projects. And for React, for example, we really look at how it grew in the community and really some critical people in the community who gave it some additional exposure or investment that we ourselves were unable to make. And so this isn't a mistake. It's not a hard lesson, but I think it's a really important one for people to think about when they are open sourcing their own projects. Really think about how you want to grow that community, what you want it to be, and what tools you can use along the way to kind of get there. Codes of conduct are really important. How do you respond to issues and pull requests, and like what tone do you take? I think it's really important to kind of help people, make the project that you want it to be and make the community what you want it to be.
What advice, now that you are an engineering manager on the Meta open source team, what advice would you give to those that are looking to start or manage their own open source programs?
It's a really good question. I think every organization is going to be a little bit different. There's a lot of trade-offs to think about. You have kind of security trade-offs, risks of putting source code that may never have been visible before onto public servers or public services. And so there's a lot from the security side to think about. And so it's where my head's been a lot recently. So it's top of mind for me. So I do think that's a really important one. I think the other one that you're balancing that with is like ease of use. How easy is it to do open source? So one of the tools that my team supports is this new project workflow. So in order to create a new project, we have a form internally. You talk about the name of the project that you want to use, why you want to open source it, who inside the company is going to be supporting it, a number of other questions. And that kind of runs through a little bit of an approval process, and then you get a repository. So this replaced a kind of long process from before where it was a lot of individuals like handing tasks off to the next person. So automating a lot of that in order to make it really easy to do, kind of has resulted in people being able to do that really easily, and my team to go build additional tools. So, there's always tooling to build, but I think it's a balance that you need to strike to give people the ability to try to start new projects, balance that with legal, security, privacy risks, and kind of come out to a place where you just find what works for your organization.
Excellent. Yep. 100% agree. Okay, Paul, enough of the serious stuff.
All right.
I think we're gonna have a little bit of fun to close out our discussion here. I'm going to initially call this the rapid fire response portion. Okay. And so basically I'm going to ask a quick question or have some sort of comparison, and you need to give your answer or preference. Okay.
All right.
So are you ready for this?
Let's do it.
Okay. Meta or Facebook?
Meta.
Good answer. Vim or Emacs?
Vim. Although, to be honest, mostly VS Code these days.
Yeah, same here. Chrome or Firefox?
Firefox. I didn't say it today, but I used to work at Mozilla. I used to work on Firefox. So
just going to say,
I'm obligated.
Is that a bias
also,
from your previous time at Mozilla?
It's a good browser.
Tabs or spaces?
Spaces.
2 or 4?
2. It used to be a 4.
GIF or GIF?
It's a hard G, Joel.
Okay.
Your name is not Goal, is it?
It is not goal. Pineapple on pizza.
When appropriate. I do enjoy a ham and pineapple pizza. Am I going to throw ham and mushroom on the same pizza? Probably not.
Ooh. Really?
Or sorry, pineapple and mushroom. Ham and mushroom, yeah, that goes together. But pineapple and mushroom, I don't think so.
All right. Beach or mountains?
Both. I think if I had to choose one today, it's the beach.
This might be the most controversial one. Okay. Ready?
All right.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
That's a hard one, Joel.
Remember, could be millions of people listening to this answer.
I grew up watching Star Trek: The Next Generation with my dad. So I'm going to go with Star Trek. I really enjoy Star Wars. But if I had to pick one, Star Trek.
I'm the opposite of you, but I'm also the same rationale. Like, I would choose, if one had to go, I would choose Star Trek to go because I love Star Wars, but I don't want Star Trek to go. You know what I mean?
Yes. Let's have both.
You know what? We're going to end it and say that both can still exist and they can coexist.
Okay. We reject the premise of that question.
Okay. Well, that's it, Paul. Thanks so much for coming on. And this was really a fun discussion, enlightening to me, actually. I actually learned a few tidbits and we know each other really well. I hope the audience kind of understands what goes on a bit in the, behind the scenes of managing an open source program. And I'm glad you do what you do. You make things a lot better for the program at Meta. And I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate the time that you took to discuss this with me. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Joel. And I look forward to the next season of the Diff / behind the scenes.
Talk to you soon, Paul.
Bye, Joel.
Bye.